Today we are looking at the Phillips curve. This is a higher level only topic, and we're going to look at the inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. And you can see on the graph this relationship between unemployment and the rate of inflation, and of course here is our Phillips screwdriver. Let's draw a series of AD curves shifting to the right. And as AD shifts right, let's look at what happens to unemployment and inflation. So what I'd like to emphasize before we do this is that we are looking at this point with AD shifting. So let's draw this as AD2, call this point B. AD3, call this point C, and let's say one last one. AD4, point D, and we're shifting each time to the right. So we're going from A to B to C to D. As we go from A to B, we see that output or real GDP has increased, so unemployment has gone down. And when we move from A to B, we see that the price level has gone from P1 to P2, so inflation has gone up. If we look at the relationship between, I'll just call this Y2. If we look from B to C, once again, we have output has increased from Y2 to Y3, so unemployment's gone down. And if we look at the price level, it's gone from P2 to P3, so it's gone up. So we can see this inverse relationship that unemployment goes down and inflation goes up. If we were to draw a series of AD shifting to the left, we would still see this inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. But if AD shifts to the left, we have output going down, so unemployment would go up, but we'd also see that the price level or inflation is going down. So again, inverse relationship, but in the opposite direction. If we take these points A, B, and C and plot them on the following graph, we would have something that looks like the following. We could take point A, put it here, and we saw that unemployment went down. In other words, output went up. So watch this x-axis. It's no longer output, but it's unemployment. So with AD shifting to the right, output went up, unemployment went down. So we're shifting from A over to here. And we saw that the price level increased to get to B. If we went from B to C, again, unemployment goes down, the price level goes up. And if we went from C to D, we have the same thing happening, the inverse relationship. If we connected these points D, C, B, and A, we would have something that looks like this. And that is intentionally a curve, not a straight line. So remember, from each point, unemployment and inflation move in opposite directions. And this is known as the short-run Phillips curve. And let me emphasize again, it is because of changes in AD that we see this particular shape. The Phillips curve, now this is incredibly powerful. It suggests that there's an inverse relationship between unemployment and inflation. So an economy can choose then between a relatively low rate of inflation and higher unemployment rate, or it could choose to have a higher rate of inflation and a lower unemployment rate. So if this relationship were to hold, policymakers would be faced with having to make a difficult choice between two desirable but often conflicting alternatives. So what are we going to do? We're going to decide to tackle inflation, or are we going to decide to tackle unemployment? Note that the y-axis measures the rate of inflation. So please don't write down simply inflation. It's a rate of inflation. And this is defined as the percentage increase in the price level. So it's possible to have increases in the price level with no increases in the rate of inflation. So as an example, let's say the rate of inflation was constant and it was 3%. So the rate of inflation didn't change from year to year. It's 3%, 3%, 3% in terms of how prices increased, but the rate of the increase did not change. So this constant rate of inflation of 3% will result in larger and larger increases in the price level. So a breakdown in the relationship. This model did not hold during the events of the 1970s and the 1980s, when we had a number of aggregate supply-side shocks, and the biggest one being the OPEC oil crisis, when there was stagflation. So just as a reminder, what happened in the 70s is that the OPEC, so Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, had decided to limit production and hence drove up prices significantly in the 70s. Because oil is used as such an input for many industries and for transportation, it had a macroeconomic effect of shifting SAS to the left. And when the SAS curve shifts left, so picking this up here, we know that there's both higher inflation and higher unemployment. So in this case, a very undesirable situation. So let's look at what happens when SAS shifts left. This is supposed to be a straight line, my apologies. We have SAS2, we have Y2, so output is down, and we have P2, so the price level is up. So as we move from point A to point B, we have inflation is up, and we have unemployment is up. So no longer is there an inverse relationship, we have both of them increasing. So if we had a shifting Phillips curve, and we had our point A from the last slide, we would have increasing unemployment, and we would have increasing inflation moving from A to B, and we could be seeing this with a number of shifts from A to B, and if this happened again, if this happened again, and so on. So we would have the short run Phillips curve 1 here, and then we would have another short run Phillips curve 2, and then again, if we had the same supply side shocks, we could continue the process. We'll now move into the long-run Phillips curve. In the 1970s, Nobel Prize-winning monetarist economist Milton Friedman argued that there's only a temporary trade-off between inflation and unemployment, not a permanent one, and we'll look at this in just a moment. So scenario, imagine that there's an increase in AD. At this new short-run equilibrium, there will be lower unemployment and higher inflation. We know this already. There will be pressure to move back to the long-run equilibrium. In this case, wages will rise to meet the increases in the price level, and SAS will shift left. We looked at this in the neoclassical model when we looked at how in the long run there's going to be a tendency to move back to this natural rate of unemployment. And in the short run, we have AD shifting right. So we have AD2, and we've moved from A to B. So that's the short run response. And then in the long run, because of the increase in the price level, we have upward pressure on wages. And then we have SAS shifting to the left, bringing us back to the natural rate of unemployment. And we can call this point C. So just reiterating from A to B, we know when AD shifts, we're going to have unemployment is down and inflation is up. And if SAS shifts to the right, we know that we're going to have no longer the inverse relationship. We're going to have unemployment is up and inflation is up. So this long-run Phillips curve, let's look at these points A, B, and C. Let's say if we started at point A here, and we had the initial shifting of AD. We went from point A to point B. But in response, the long run response, wages increased in response to the rising price levels. And we had another shift happening. Sorry, let me just short run Phillips Curve 1, short run Phillips Curve 2. We had another reaction where unemployment increased and inflation increased, bringing us to C. Now, if this process were to continue and AD shifting to the right and in response wages increasing and SAS shifting to the left, we could see that we're going to have a series of short-run Phillips curves where we're coming back to this long-run Phillips curve point, which is also the natural rate of unemployment or the full employment rate of output. So the long-run Phillips curve is vertical at the natural rate of unemployment, indicating that now there is no inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment, because we'll always be drawn back to that long-run equilibrium as we are in the neoclassical model and in the long-run Phillips curve. If the government wants to achieve a lower rate of unemployment, it can do so by using demand-side policies only in the short run, in which case it will also have to accept a higher price level. It can, however, lower the natural rate of unemployment by the use of supply-side policies. A lower natural rate of unemployment will appear as a rightward shift of the LAS curve and a leftward shift of the long-run Phillips curve. Let's actually look at this on the next slide. So if we have economic growth, we know with the AD-SAS-LAS model that LAS will shift to the right, LAS2. And we'd have here Y1 and Y2. So we've managed to lower the natural rate of unemployment by increasing output. In the long-run Phillips curve, look carefully at what the x-axis is. It's the unemployment rate. We will be lowering the unemployment rate. Sorry. And so the long-run Phillips curve in this case would be shifting to the left because of the way the axes are set up. If you were to answer this in an essay question, I think the IB examiners, if you were to use both models, would just think that this is absolutely incredible knowledge on your part. So what are some examples of supply-side policies? Well, I'll remind you that there's interventionist, and there's market-oriented. I'll just list a few, but you can list some more. So interventionist, the government's actually getting involved in the process. So this could be more research and development. It could be more education and training. Could be more government projects. Etc. Market-oriented could be things like making labor more flexible. So things like reduced benefits, easier to fire workers, lower income taxes. And I'll put etc. Thank you.